Welcome back, guys. I'm Zell, and today we're getting another look at the Buck Marksman. Alright guys, before we go to the camera down, Jerry Mellons sold me a Buck Marksman, which gives us two to mess with. So we are going to get the acid out, the grinders out, all that good stuff, and see what we can do with one of these. See what we can do to customize one of these Marksmen. It has some issues, and we're going to try to alleviate some of those issues whenever we do that, and just make it look cool. But I wanted to get another look at the Marksman before we start tearing it apart. Alright guys, so the Buck Marksman, what do we get? Oh, we get aluminum scales. We got two of them here, so we'll just leave them laid out here so we can see both sides. We get aluminum scales. They got some scallops cut out, a slightly oversized pivot that's slightly stylized, and we get a very deep carry pocket clip. And we will move this one out of the way and get around to the back. And here we have the G&G Strong Lock System, or SLS lock bar anyhow. This is a very neat setup, and I really like it. There are some downfalls that we'll talk about here in a minute, but anyhow, we have this nice big back strap, and we have a wee bit of jimping there on our flipper tab and rolling it on around to the top. We have a nicely centered blade down in there, and by the way, this one has been aged, roughed up a little bit because of some things I had to do that we will talk about. But I actually preferred it after I saw this one came from Jerry Mellons, and this is what he had done to his. Kind of give it an aged, patinaed look, worn look. So I went ahead and done that to the one I already had. I went a little more aggressive than Jerry did, but that's alright. Ended up liking them both. For size comparison, the Buck Marksman, we've got a 3.5 inch blade in there with a closed length of 4 3/4 inches and a nice skinny handle thickness of about 4.476 and a closed height of 1.34. So we're slightly shorter than that Spyderco thing, and pretty good in all the other measurements, and especially with a 3.5 inch blade and a weight of 4.25 ounces. So this thing is pretty conservative in every manner as far as dimensions go for the amount of blade length it has. So anyhow, direct size comparisons. We have our Buck 110. It's really very comparable to the Buck 110, except the Buck 110 is like well over 5 ounces. And it's also comparable to our Rat Model 1. Rat is also about 5 ounces, so it's 3/4 of an ounce lighter and somewhat thinner, I believe. Some of our mainstays, we have our Spyderco Delica, and of course we're a little bigger than Spyderco Delica because we have a longer blade and a little bit heftier build here. And just for fun, we'll lay out our Mini Griptilian. And of course, it's bigger than the Mini Grip. Anyhow, moving on along, our pocket clip. Now, we talked about this a little bit. It is very deep carry, and it's also tip up left or right. Deep carry is facilitated because of these two screws right here that hold the pocket clip on the very end of the knife, letting it fall off the top of the knife and give you a very deep carry. And throwing our Levi's up here, we can get a look at that. So, got that thing in your pocket, and that's really all that's showing is your little pocket clip with the Buck anvil on it. The flip up is not too drastic here. In fact, it is so undrastic that if you're wearing tactical pants that have the several layers right there for toughening up the pocket, that may be a problem. You may have to bend this up a little bit, or some of the work pants also are like that. So be aware of that. It's not a big deal. You just need to take the pocket clip off, put it in a vise or nice pair of pliers with something, and with some rubber to keep you from scratching it up, and give it a little bend and everything will be fine. and onto our blade. We've got a drop point blade. It's hollow ground, fairly high, makes for a reasonable slicer. And the only complaint I really have here is the sharpening choil is going to have to be extended. And that's part of why we're doing this video. This is kind of the before to the after. Because we're going to be taking one of these knives and doing quite a bit of stuff to it. Another thing I'd like to point out is whenever we look down the spine of this knife, there have been some complaints, and they're valid, that the G10 version of this knife has a very, very thick tip, and it does. Don't get me wrong. There's one reason that happens, though. There's very little distal taper in this knife. If you look down the spine of this knife, it stays thick all the way down till we get to right here. Then we start to taper to the point. And it's not really fine. Doesn't come down to a really pointy tip like, say, a Spyderco would. Or even, we got that mini grip sitting out here. And that mini grip comes down to a really fine point compared to the Buck Marksman. So what happens is this comes down to its point, and then whenever you go to sharpen the knife, you get a nice even sharpened edge up to about right here. Whenever we start to come up the knife, it thickens up because, well, the hollow grind thickens up and the point isn't terribly fine, and the hollow grind wasn't ran around the point like mini makers would do. It's pretty much straight. It kind of trails up just a little bit, but not a whole lot. So we end up with a thicker sharpened edge at the tip. Now, some people aren't going to like that. Other people are going to realize that that gives you a stronger tip, and they're going to like that. So, it's kind of one of those 6 of one, half a dozen of the other things. Whenever I first sharpened the knife and I was trying to figure it out, it kind of bothered me. Once I figured out what was going on with the spine of the knife, I was like, oh, well, okay, that's fine. We got a nice strong tip on the knife. Anyhow, from here, we're going to go to the pause and read card, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, mechanicals on this guy. Wow, we got something to talk about here. First off, it is a flipper running on bearings. And it's running on similar bearings to what you see in the ZT line and lots of others. It's a caged ball bearing system. And we'll have one apart here pretty soon to look at. Difference here is once you unlock this knife, that blade is just running on the bearings. There's nothing hindering it. There's no lock bar. There's no lock button for a button lock. There's nothing. It's just running straight on the bearings. So this is absolutely the smoothest knife I have ever put my hands on. Whenever you're talking about free falling and all of that sort of thing. Now, does it compare to the hydraulic smooth of some of the other frame locks? Well, yes and no. It's different. This is just absolutely free falling. Doesn't hit anything. Now, the rest of the mechanicals is where it gets interesting. We have some cutouts on the back of the blade. This bottle opener and lock bar here, looks like a bottle opener, that's why I keep calling it that, is very interesting. As you will zoom in here a bit, watch that lock bar as I close the blade. See how it lifts and then it pops down. Stays up just a little bit, but it pops down. That's your closed detent. There's a notch on the back of the blade that this lock bar fits into. There we go to open the blade. Watch that lock bar again. It's going to lift and then it's going to pop back down into a notch on the blade. So this is also what keeps us locked open. So whenever you lift it, and by the book you're supposed to lift it with both hands, have your hand on the blade and close it, but whenever we lift it, it just lets that blade drop free. But the detent provides enough of a detent so that opening the knife is not a problem. And we'll get more into the internals of this knife whenever we actually do a tear down to prepare it for all the stuff we're going to do, you know, the acid washes and all this other stuff. That is our locking mechanism, as well as this back lock here, or this lock strap here, holds it locked on that hook right there, which is a cutout in the blade. We've already talked about the action a little bit, and you know, it's a flipper and it flips fine. In fact, that little bit of detent it has is more than enough to get a good solid flip anytime you flip it. And it doesn't matter if you're pushing on it or light switching it, it's gonna open. Now, unlocking the knife, that's an interesting thing. I've seen people do it several different ways. The best way I figured out how to do it is flip your knife open and take your thumb up here and just let the knife fall closed. You know, you can put some wrist into it if you need to, but the knife will fall closed on its own. Now, whenever I do it the other hand, I use my index finger. I don't know why, it just feels more right in this hand to use the index finger. And same thing, just let the blade fall closed. Works just fine. And here's where things get a little interesting. Our ergonomics are great. I love the way this knife feels in my hand. Doesn't matter how I get a hold of it, it's there for me. However, your pockets may not like this right out of the gate. And as you can see around here in these little cutouts, these things are actually back cut, which means whenever you try to stick this thing in and out of your pocket on the side with the pocket clip, they will literally rip your pockets apart, literally. So what I did was I got the Dremel set up and used a stone on the Dremel to soften all these edges, and then I went ahead and kind of gave the knife a worn look to hide the fact that I had done that. Comes out alright as far as I'm concerned. Some of you may like it, some of you may not. Anyhow, that is something to be aware of. These things have a back cut in them, and what that means is there's a little bit of an edge overhanging right here that will cut into your clothes as you take the knife in and out of your pocket. Now, it's not something that's any worse than some really aggressive G10 or something or things like that, but it is something to be aware of, especially with it being under the pocket clip right here. Before we get to the odd stuff, you've also got your blade hole there, which works fine. You can open this thing nice and silently, and really you can open it more silent than most knives. In fact, I'll put it right up here against the microphone and do it. Here we go. That's all the noise it makes. And as far as oddities, the one thing that may turn people off from a buck marksman is this backstrap lock. I know it looks a little funny until you get used to it, but that's not really an issue. The issue is that this lock is going to take some user servicing over its lifetime. And what I mean by that is you have an adjustment screw right here. You have these two screws right here, and this piece right here has this little tab in it that allows you to move this lock back and forth to set tension on the little indent or hook on the blade. And occasionally you're going to have to adjust that. So that means if you're going to own a buck marksman, you're going to have to know a little about Loctites, you're going to have to know a little about using some tools, you're going to have some tools, some Allen wrenches, because this one here is an Allen wrench and these two are Allen wrenches. So it's not a knife for somebody who wants to just buy the knife and be done with it, not have to do anything but take it to somebody to sharpen it every once in a while. It's going to take a little bit of the user being involved in the maintenance of the knife. But anyhow, guys, that is a look at our buck marksman. Here very soon, we're going to take these apart, get after them with the grinders and the Dremels and acid and all kinds of fun stuff. But I just wanted to get a kind of a before and kind of shorten up the last review. The last review I did on this made it kind of long, so got a more condensed version. And as we're going through this, I will take one of these apart and we will go through the pieces and parts and why they work and how they work on this lock mechanism. Alright guys, so that was the buck marksman, and Chloe has decided to join us. It's one of my favorite knives. As I said in the camera down video, we've got the issue with these scallops back here, and they're too sharp. We're going to fix that whenever we do the customization stuff on it, and I think I forgot to mention that it's a 154 cm blade as well. But as you can see, this is one of the smoothest knives out there. Hopefully, you can get down now, sweetie? Okay. Go pick on Mom for a while? Alright. So, it's definitely one of my favorites, and I hope you enjoy the series on customizing this thing. And I really appreciate you stopping by and hanging out with me and Chloe for a few minutes. And I'd really appreciate it if you would like, share, and subscribe. We're getting close to that number where I can start to do some more things with the channel for you guys, and I'm just really wanting to get there so that we can bust out some of this stuff and do some more fun things. So that would be awesome if you would take care of that, and you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.